Wow, I haven't had an audience this big for quite a while. In fact, I haven't had any audience for quite a while. The last time I was fired, it's a sort of occupational hazard in my life, was 2004. And as I floundered around wondering what the hell to do with myself, the phone goes. And it was Simon Cowell. Let's have lunch. So we went to the Belvedere restaurant in London's Holland Park. From memory, he had the spaghetti bolognese. That's not really from memory. He always has spaghetti bolognese. And we sat there and he said, there's a gap in the TV market around the world. And I said, what is it? He said, well, there's all these singing shows, but there's no all-round TV talent show where anyone can do anything they like. And you have 3 judges, you have some buzzers, and if you get 2 buzzers, you go home. If you don't get any buzzers, you stay in the competition. I'm going to fill that gap. So I waited and thought it was very exciting. And then he said, and I may want you to be part of it. I was like, great. So we carry on talking about this. And about a month later, we get the call that ITV in England would like to do a pilot for what was going to be called Paul O'Grady's Got Talent. Now, Paul O'Grady was a big TV star in England, and that was going to be the title of the first Got Talent show. And I did the pilot with Simon and a TV personality called Fern Britton. It was a huge success. ITV loved it. They greenlit a series. This was my big primetime comeback. I pre-ordered in my head the Aston Martin Virage I'd always dreamt of. And then Paul O'Grady resigned from ITV and defected to Channel 4 in a flurry of mutual insults, and the show was unceremoniously canned. I slunk back to the wheel of my Ford Fiesta, disconsolate. 6 weeks later, though, Simon texted me, hi, I've sold the rights to Got Talent to NBC. They want to repackage it in a patriotic way and call it America's Got Talent. He said, I can't be in it because of American Idol, so I need someone as evil, arrogant, and obnoxious as me to be on the panel, and your name immediately sprang to mind. I've flown out the next day. I met the NBC executives. They'd never heard of me. But we did an okay interview at Simon's house, and then I flew back and I waited, and eventually he called me and he said, it's bad news, I'm afraid. My heart sank. He said, they want you. Which is a classic Cowell sting, of course. A month later, I was on the Paramount movie lot in Hollywood. The Ford Fiesta had gone. The Aston Martin was parked outside the trailer. 3 months later, America's Got Talent launched to a massive fanfare and was #1 throughout that summer on the American ratings. And the reason I'm telling you all this is that Britain's Got Talent then followed, and then in 67 different countries, the Got Talent formula is now airing around the world. It's become officially the most successful entertainment program in the history of planet Earth. And it all came from Simon waking up one day and thinking, why is there no all-round talent show on TV anymore? It's that kind of simple visionary genius that has led Simon to sell 350 million records, make TV shows that air in 200 countries and territories, generating $1.5 billion worth of music sales with Sony from Got Talent and X Factor artists alone. Simon took a 47-year-old spinster from a little Scottish village called Susan Boyle. And over the next 5 years, she sold 22 million records. To put it in context, she outsold Lady Gaga, Beyonce, and Katy Perry. She'd never sung outside a church hall. He found a ventriloquist called Terry Fator in America, who for 25 years had been earning $500 a week. Terry Fator, after winning America's Got Talent, signed a 5-year, $100 million deal in Las Vegas. He's the highest paid star on the Vegas Strip. But if any story personifies Simon best, it's surely the story of One Direction. He put the band together during an X Factor series. They didn't even win that series. They came 3rd. He then put them in a movie, and they became, at the same time, the biggest pop band in the world. Now think about that for a moment. A #1 pop band derived from a #1 TV show starring in a #1 movie, all of which have been created and produced by the same person. A pretty extraordinary thing, which is very unusual even in this business. He's been a good friend of mine for 25 years. He's built one of the most extraordinarily successful entertainment empires in the world, and he's a man who, the last time I interviewed him, cried. So, fingers crossed, everybody. I'm going to crack him again. Ladies and gentlemen, my great pleasure to introduce the man and the legend, Mr. Simon Cowell.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Simon.
Hello.
Now, you've been responsible for some of the biggest, most talked about productions in modern history, but there's only one production which I would say 99% of his audience are currently buzzing and gossiping about, so I may as well get to that one first. How is your son, Eric?
He is fantastic. He is nearly 8 months old. He's being very naughty, so I'm teaching him well. And we're kind of priming him now to take over the business. I'm going to wait for 3 years before I put him on TV.
Well, you gave an interview, actually, this week saying, I want to fast forward a few years so I can introduce Eric to go-karting and women.
Maybe we'll reverse the order.
Before we get into the main interview.
But seriously, it was the most fantastic thing that ever happened in my life. That, Lauren, and you have kids at my age, hard. It's amazing.
Do you feel that you're in the happiest place you've been?
Yeah, totally. I mean, sometimes when you're working as hard as I work, you kind of think, well, what's it all going to be for at the end? And then when somebody like him comes along, then it's all worthwhile. And I've also got to mention Squiddly and Diddly, my dogs, as well.
Of course. Let's play a sizzle reel. This is of Syco's main achievements over the last few years. It's a pretty extraordinary reel. Watch this.
Is on. So let's see if Britain's got talent!
We're going to find a star today.
Welcome to America's Got Talent!
Bring on the talent!
Yes.
Whoa! The word godlike.
Set the bar way up there.
That is unbelievable.
You are why we make shows like this.
That's how you do an audition.
This is
going to be one heck of a competition.
Everybody scream! Midnight memories. Oh, baby, you and me, stumbling in the street. Sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it. Midnight memories. Oh, everywhere we go, never saying no, just do it, do it, do it, do it. I keep going to forever to break 'cause I need something that can wash out the pain. And I promise I'm slipping all these demons away. But your ghost, the ghost of you, it gets me away.
Anyone who read your school reports would be absolutely baffled that you've managed to achieve this.
Totally.
When you look back over it, and we'll come to your sort of overview at the end, but when you look back to when it started, was there a stage in your early life, in your young years, that you thought, okay, this is what I want to be? I want to be one day an entertainment icon, mogul, whatever. Was it there in your blood?
No, not really. I realized as a kid, you know, that everything I was interested in, I loved going to the movies. It was my Saturday treat with my dad. I remember buying my first record, She Loves You by the Beatles, and it was just, again, I remember that moment very vividly. And I also remember when we got our first colour television. You know, our first colour TV, it was black and white before. And, you know, these are three things that really interested me. So when I left school with no qualifications, it was like one of those three I wanted to work in. But, you know, beyond that, it was just getting a foot in the door. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Your dad was a pivotal figure in your life, and he died, sadly, before seeing much of your success. What were the values that he instilled in you, do you think, which you've been able to bring to the way you run your business?
Well, I've said this often, but it's the one thing that always sticks in my mind with my dad, because my dad was a very level-headed guy, and he worked for EMI for a long time, and he was a very loyal guy. And and I asked him a question once about somebody who worked for him, and how long she'd worked with him, and why. And he said to me, what you're going to have to remember, Simon, at some point in your life, if you get to run your own business, everybody has a sign on their head, an invisible sign, that says, make me feel important. And that carried through to my working life, so that when you're working on a show as big as Got Talent or X Factor, there are literally hundreds of people, and you have to recognize the fact that every single one of those people plays a part, and you have to recognize their part. And that's how I taught myself how to make TV shows, because they were kind enough to tell me how to do it.
Did you forget that when it was on my head, that particular?
Yeah.
The key moment for you, it seemed, and I've interviewed you obviously a number of times, but the key moment came when you basically had started work and then you lost everything. You were down to literally your last 4 or 5 pounds. You were back living with your parents. The Porsche you'd bought in the yuppie 80s had gone.
Yeah.
And everything you dreamed of had suddenly crashed around your legs. That was only 17, 18 years ago. I mean, not that long ago. What did that tell you, to literally go back to nothing and have to start from scratch?
But no matter what they tell you, Piers, or how you run a business, if you're going to work in films, if you're going to work in music, if you're going to work in TV, there's only two things that really matter: stars and hits. You have both, I promise you, you build a business. I didn't have those at the time. I didn't have enough hits. I was borrowing money. When you work for a record label, you literally are given a huge budget, but you have no training. So you make more mistakes than getting it right. And at that time, I was making more mistakes. But it was a leveler interesting. I went back with my mum and dad. I owed the bank probably £500,000. I worked a way of paying it back. And I just said to myself at that point on, don't work on hype. Don't work on make-believe. You know, try and make hits, get better at doing what I'm doing. And in a way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
The genius move.
Although I don't want to do it again. It was fine at the time. I wouldn't want to do it again.
The genius move that many say you brought to this game, really, was fusing the power of television with the power of music. You'd obviously been in music. Now, if you work in the music business, you use television to promote your acts and so on. But nobody had really thought about doing a show where you could create your own new stars and then sell their records. When did you first think that this is the way to go? That's going to be my thing.
Well, the truth is, Piers, is that it had always been there. I mean, you know, when you think of some of the most significant moments of huge artists' careers, whether it was the first time Elvis went on TV, and off the back of that kind of like, you know, there was an outrage, but it became a worldwide news story. My memories of the Beatles are shots of screaming girls at their concerts, or arriving at London Airport where you've got 10,000 people waiting for them. So TV played a massive part in spreading their fame worldwide. Obviously the Monkees, you know, I used to watch as a kid. And for me, I was very concerned about the stranglehold radio had on record companies. Really concerned me that my hands were always going to be in the hands of a radio programmer. So I started to think that there could be ways of breaking artists in a non-traditional sense, and that TV would be the platform for doing it.
People have said you're not cool, that the stuff you do isn't cool. What do you say to that?
Who cares? Couldn't care less. Everyone has their own different definition. I mean, some people think you're cool. No, I met someone once who said that.
What are you laughing at?
She was blind, but liked your voice. You know, honestly, that's never bothered me. You know, when you work for a record label, or whoever you work for, your responsibility is you make money for yourself, you make money for the company, and like I said before, you have hits. I got lucky with something where there was a television program, a drama, which featured two actors. The show, it was called Soldier, Soldier. It was getting 16 million viewers, and these two guys not randomly, it was within the storyline, sang a version of Unchained Melody for about 90 seconds. The following day, every retailer in the country was getting calls to say, is this record available? And every record label ignored it. And it took me about 6 months to persuade these guys to sign to me and make an album.
And how many records did that sell?
I think for 2 years running, we were the biggest selling artist in the UK. 3 #1 singles, 2 #1 albums. I mean, probably 10, 12 million records.
And was that the moment for you when you thought, okay, my gut instinct about this proves it. I've got to find a way now to create my own stuff and do it through television?
Not necessarily, Piers, no. All I sensed is that I saw the power of TV. I saw how it could create an emotion, which, you know, because it was the storyline around when they sang that song, which really inspired people to want to buy the record.
It was Robson and Jerome, for those who don't remember this.
Yeah. And, you know, it was just part of the learning curve. I didn't know what was coming next, but I did learn something from it.
I always say about you, knowing you well, that it's your simplistic tastes allow you to understand what the masses often like, in the sense that you're not a complicated guy. You like your spaghetti bolognese, your fish and chips, your beer, you know, you like to watch Flintstone movies and so on. You like Sinatra and stuff like that. You have quite middle-of-the-road tastes in that sense. Do you think that is part of the trick of being able to choose stuff which a mass audience is going to instinctively like?
100%. I mean, in my business, if you guess, I believe you'll get it wrong. You have to become the audience permanently. So when I'm editing or noting one of our shows, it has to be what I like, what I find emotional, what I find funny. And if I don't, then I'll often say I don't think the show is working. But, you know, I'm always really a fan of everything I make.
Syco was created in 2002. Why did you create the company, and what was the vision from the start?
Well, you know, this was off the back, obviously, of pop stars. You know, I was there at the beginning of Idol. We did this as a very defensive move, Idol, to actually get pop stars off the air because I wanted the record rights for a new show. And then I decided in 2002 that we would start a company that would own all of the rights for the TV programs, the music rights. some of the ancillary rights, because it was quite obvious this was going to be a big business. But at the beginning, if I'm being honest with you, Piers, I was much more focused on just the music. The show, to be frank, was a vehicle to find a star.
But a lot of the success of your business was centered around your persona, which many assumed was you putting on some mean act. I said, oh, he really is that mean. That's what he's like.
Yeah, pot kettle.
But it wasn't really mean. It was more, you've always just been a straight talker. And transforming that honesty to a screen hadn't really been seen in that way before.
Well, because you can't treat the audience like idiots. I mean, if somebody comes on stage and is literally tone deaf, and I say to them, oh, take a couple of singing lessons and you'll be a star, they'd think I'm mad. So I was just being honest with them.
Have you mellowed with age?
Look, I find it funnier, to be honest with you, Piers. I mean, it still amuses me that when somebody comes on, they're 16 years old, and I go, why are you here? And they say, I'm blessed. And I say, you're not. Honestly, trust me, God didn't decide today, you know what, forget everything else, I'm just going to make you have a great voice. And they are in there, they sing terribly. I can't help but find that funny. And on the reverse side, you never forget that moment, or you were there, when Susan Boyle walks on stage for the first time, or Leona Lewis walks into your audition, or, the One Direction guys. I mean, that's why we do what we do.
I mean, the Susan Boyle moment was an extraordinary moment, wasn't it? I mean, we were both there in Scotland. And I remember afterwards going back to America and just understanding that we knew the reaction was big when it aired. But I remember George Clooney talking to me about Susan Boyle and then having to tell Susan, and she was like, Clooney? I remember Robin Williams banging on my door once at a show and going into what sounded like a Mrs. Doubtfire impression.
Yeah.
I realised it was actually Susan Boyle. And so on and so on. And seeing that effect of these superstars in Hollywood all going crazy for this little lady from Scotland was an amazing thing.
Well, yeah, and if you ever forget that, because, we've got to a stage, I think, with certain shows now where the panels are so celebrity-driven. I've always had a feeling about putting too many artists on a panel, because artists don't want to find other artists. It's just not in them. For me, I run a record label, so that's all I want to do.
The key partnerships, I guess, for you have been Sony on the music side, Fremantle on the television side. You actually don't have that big a staff, 50, 60 people worldwide. You keep it very lean, and you're generating billions of dollars of business from all the strands of what you do. How important are those two big relationships for you?
Everything. I mean, without Fremantle, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I mean, when, the first show I made, Fremantle made. They had the infrastructure, obviously they knew how to make these shows. I didn't know how to make TV shows. I had no international distribution. But what I really liked about Fremantle was the fact they recognized that the combination of a television company and a music company making a music show is a much better concept of just a TV company making it, because I know how to make hit records, I know how to spot stars, and they know how to make TV shows. So they were very generous in allowing us to be part of the process. And the same with Sony. Sony didn't have to let me start a TV company. All they wanted me was to make records. So those partnerships have been the key to our success, because what I say to my staff, and we don't have many, is one idea a year, as good as Got Talent, could pay for your next 20 years. I mean, it's not much to ask for.
I mean, the Got Talent spread around the world is remarkable. We've got a map, which we're going to show people now, which is a map of the world, and hopefully will now show us where Got Talent airs. It's in over 160 places.
It's not that.
I have every faith in them.
It's still not that.
There we are. Now, all the blue is where Got Talent airs. Most of the white is ocean, where even Simon Cowell's tentacles haven't spread. But what is fascinating to me...
I've got news on that.
Well, the middle of the blue on the right is Mongolia, and half of Papua New Guinea is also white. My question to you is, why have you not been able to sell to Mongolia and the other half of Papua New Guinea?
Which will be my first question when I finish this meeting.
When you look at that...
I mean, Mongolia's Got Talent. I mean, come on. That's a no-brainer.
But is the problem that it may not have talent? Is that why you haven't
we'll
sold
find it. we'll open it up to yaks, whatever, I don't care. But
I mean, that must concern you, that gap, doesn't it, in
yes,
the
it's a big
Mongolian
gap.
market?
That's huge.
When you look at this, you must have a slight pinch me moment, don't you, about the breadth?
Sorry, I'm still bothered about Mongolia. Give me 30 seconds to get myself over it. No, I'm kidding, although I'm not. Yeah, it's very impressive. But like I said, you know, it's been an amazing team effort. I mean, my staff, the hours they work, which is incredible. I don't thank them enough for what they do. You know, they're always in the office till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. George and Abby, who work in my international department, their air miles, are worth a lot. It's non-stop. And then together, as I said, with Fremantle, and the care they put into the local versions. It's not just let's just sell the show, it's let's make it a hit in each country and be passionate about it. That's what's made it work.
The One Direction story is arguably your greatest triumph. And I simply say that because they've sold 46 million records, had 94 number ones around the world. Latest album...
95.
95, is it? Latest album, number one in 67 countries before it's
68.
even been released. Right? So these update all the time anyway, don't they? Although you're joking, you're not really, right? 3 nights at Wembley Stadium, 3 at the Hollywood Rose Bowl, sold out the San Siro Milan in 3 minutes, made a number one movie and so on. You created that band from X Factor. They didn't even win the series they appeared on. What was it about them? And once you realized you had something with them, how do you take them to where you took them?
Well, I think create's the wrong word. I don't like that word. I think I gave 5 people an opportunity to be in a group because I thought as a whole they'd have a better chance of being successful because they were so young and inexperienced than trying to enter the show as solo artists. The groups, I've got to admit, were terrible that year. So what I did was, partly because I needed to, and partly because I felt these 5 guys, you know, could work together. And that's how most groups actually are, you know, actually that's how they do happen. But to be fair to them, you know, I gave them an opportunity. It was the boys who ran with it. They worked out the kind of group they were going to be. They worked out the kind of records they wanted to be, working with Sonny, who runs my record label. And it was a fantastic collaboration. Would I have dreamt what they've done? No,
when you were sitting there watching them in LA as you were last week, 80,000 people or whatever, that must be a remarkable thing to observe from where you took them.
Well, you know, because you can get very cynical, and people do get very cynical about these shows. And as you said, there's a lot of snobbiness in the music business. But the fact that we gave this guys an opportunity, and then you see something like that, of course, you have to pinch yourself. But again, it's why we got into this business in the first place, so something like that could happen.
You yourself, obviously you're the boss, you're the guy that everyone plays off. I've worked on your shows in America and Britain, and you know, your word is sacrosanct in the end, although you do allow collaboration to a point. You normally think you're right. Let me just tell you
one story about Piers when we worked together on Britain's Got Talent, is that he was waiting for his, what I call the pompous moment, when an artist came on and he delivered this huge speech, which is, Simon, unlike you, I don't do this for the money. I do this for the art. I care about the artist. I'm not someone like you who's so cynical. And I just said, darling, remember who has the edit. It was never seen.
None of my best lines ever appeared, ever. A ruthless assassin in the editing suite. But you personally, if I was describing you to what you like to work for to somebody, and I'm sure people are pretty fascinated by what you really like to work for, I'd say you can veer between brilliant, happy, mad, moody, difficult, very difficult, and impossible, a perfectionist. You'll email, text at 2 a.m., a genius. You can be all these things. A maverick, you're fearless, you'll take on everyone, you'll stand up to everyone. All these characteristics I saw sometimes on the same day. Is any of that unfair? Would you agree with it?
You know, I love what I do, Piers, you know, and I am, I think, a perfectionist. I think the day that you stop caring and you just let everything go out without you looking at it is the day it's over. And look, I consider myself really lucky because I was here not at MIPCOM, but at MIDEM, which is the music business equivalent, probably 30 years ago, when I was trying to run a company, and I literally did not sell anything during the week, and I went back on the medium charter flight, you know, feeling pretty depressed. So the fact that I'm sitting here today, you know, I look back on some of the things we've achieved, then I count myself incredibly lucky. And it's not, it is work, but it's a passion and it's fun. I love doing it.
The Got Talent format, as I said, airs in 67 countries. America's Got Talent alone airs in 147. X Factor.
Since you left.
Actually, it was more popular then. X Factor airs in 51 countries. X Factor UK alone airs in 147 countries. So an amazing breadth there. I guess the one apparent failure was X Factor in America coming off air in the last year. Tell me about that. And also, I noticed in the Financial Times interview yesterday that you were suggesting it may still come back in America.
Well, I think what happened was, what happened with Idol in the UK was we basically said it's Idol or X Factor, you know, and I think they should have taken X Factor and taken Idol off the air. That's my gut feeling. Trying for one network to run 2 shows a year like that is a lot. And then The Voice came out before us, and they had the coaching, the mentoring element, which of course would have been unique to X Factor, so we were following The Voice. I think the first year we made a really good series. I said we were going to get 20 million. Stupidly, we got 12.5 million. If I hadn't opened my big mouth, it would have been perceived as a hit.
I mean, the numbers you did get, actually, were pretty good comparative to most stuff that airs. Do you think you, by setting the bar so high, caused yourself unnecessary problems?
Yeah, I thought we could achieve in 1 year what I achieved in 10 years in the UK. But what I said in the FT article recently is that I believe that I and Fox gave up too early on this format, because the one thing I do know, because I work in the music business, is X Factor is the best music format in the world. And it only takes one artist, whether it's a Susan Boyle or a One Direction, and the whole thing turns on its head. So I haven't given up on X Factor America yet. And we've done this in territories like Australia. You know, it worked. You have a bad year, you take it off the air, you come back with a fresh new panel, fresh new producers, you have good artists, and you can bring these shows back.
People talk about these shows' success being built around the judges, the hosts, the production values. In the end, though, is it really about the acts?
100%.
You're only as good as who walks really on stage.
Yeah, look, Piers, you know, our competition now isn't just music shows, other people's music shows, it's food shows. It's any type of competition show. My belief is it's more exciting to see someone like Leona Lewis win and sing an amazing song than looking at a chocolate eclair at the end of a show.
I'd like to do both, actually.
Well, you probably would.
How important are the broadcasters in each territory? You've got so many territories that you're operating in, so many deals you're doing. You know, famously, you said you prefer long-term deals with established good partners, ITV, NBC, and so on. But how important is that individual relationship in each country with the broadcaster?
Well, the broadcaster is one thing. It's the people within the broadcaster which is really key. And I've been very, very fortunate that all the people I've worked with, in the main, actually, who've made our shows or put me on the shows, have become good friends. They've been supporters. They've had to trust us, because trust is key. If anybody from a network starts second-guessing what you're doing in terms of your music choices, your song choices, the relationship's going to end.
What do you look for in people that you do partnerships with?
Mutual trust. I have to trust them. And they have to trust us.
But do you look for the same kind of passion and fearlessness that you have? Are you looking for similar values when you do business deals?
Yeah, I love the idea that without being stupid, that we're all optimistic, and with that belief that one thing can turn a show on its dime. So obviously, what I said about Fremantle and Sony, the same applies to the broadcasters. If we didn't have them trusting us in the first place, then again, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I owe a lot to every one of these people who supported our shows. And the majority, they do look after them. It's like they own them as well, and that's what you look for with a broadcaster.
You've gone into movies with the One Direction movie, big hit. You've now got a partnership with Animal Logic, people behind Lego Movie, obviously, and Happy Feet. 3 animated film projects, including Betty Boop. Is movies now something that you're going to be moving more and more into after the big success you had?
Yeah, but slowly. I mean, the same principle applies to what we did with TV, is that you find the best in their field. So when we decided to go into animation, we approached Animal Logic, who we felt, after Happy Feet and Lego, weren't too big, but they were a company who were one of the best in the business. So we created a joint partnership where we would make musical animated movies together, and we sold the first. In fact, I think all three are sold now. And then we'll look at other vehicles, basically designed, hopefully, to be successful as films, but also to sell music, because that's my thought process at the moment. Is there's so many of these shows now with so many artists on that I look at something like High School Musical and think, maybe that's the route to go now.
I mean, the two things that strike me about the way you've handled your shows is that the temptation when you have a big hit show like X Factor or Got Talent is to allow broadcasters to milk that udder completely dry, run it twice a year, 3 times a year. You see that a lot in America in particular. You've always been very insistent, once a year. Why is that?
I once had a broadcaster, somebody who worked at a broadcaster, say to me, almost with pride, that he was going to run a successful TV format in the world into the ground, because he didn't believe in its long-term, whatever it was. And my blood ran cold when I heard that. Where we've been lucky is that our partners, they put them on once a year. It becomes a big part of the year, and people don't get bored of them. But you know what I told you before is what can happen if you don't have that relationship with the broadcaster.
You've not done many shows. I mean, the temptation must have been, you must have had everybody offering you a zillion things on the back of the success you've had. Why have you run with so few of them?
Because it's really hard, Piers, to come up with shows as successful as X Factor or Got Talent. I mean, Got Talent, I think, was in development for about 2.5 years. On the surface, it looks very simple, but it wasn't that simple when we decided to make the show. Too many shows will kill the market. And what I'm seeing happening at the moment is it's all about gimmicks. For me, a show is about the end, not the beginning. You know, who's going to win? What's that final moment going to be? And it's not about a wall going up and down.
We know what you're saying there, Simon. Little dig at the rivals.
Mentioning no names.
How important, we listened to James Murdoch earlier about the way people are going to be watching television in particular going forward. You know, I've got 3 sons in their teens and one's 21. They watch everything on their phones now. They might watch much of it not in real time, but later from clips from YouTube and so on and so on. Are you seeing the whole nature of the way people consume your shows changing very fast?
Well, I think everything's an advantage. I mean, I can remember someone from a record label saying to me, you know, the problems that iTunes are going to have, and I'm thinking, I didn't see any problems there. All I know is that there's 40 million people in the UK at the moment who are all carrying a record player in their back pocket, which is a phone, and on that phone is a shop, and it takes you 2 minutes or 30 seconds to buy a record. I embrace this new technology as we saw with Susan Boyle. How YouTube promoted Susan all over the world. It was the best promotion we ever had. If there's new ways of watching our shows, i.e. laptops, phones, it's only to our advantage.
What is the moment, if I said to you I had the power to relive for you any moment of your career, when you look back, what's the moment you choose?
If I'm being honest with you, I think the most significant week I ever had was the second week's ratings on X Factor UK. Because literally I could feel about 1 million knives about to go into my back.
I had one massive one.
Yeah, I know. And it wasn't a great feeling, and the first week's numbers were okay. And I knew everything determined on the second week, and I was in Mexico. So I was behind the UK time zone, and I phoned up Nigel Hall, who runs Syco TV. Oh, no, I got a voice message, that's right. And I just listened to the voice message, and all I could hear was screaming. And I thought, that's a happy scream. and it was a happy scream, and the numbers had gone up by 1 million. So that was pretty significant.
You got a text this morning which in many ways I think sums up, I guess, what these shows are really about for you. Tell me about that.
Well, I was thinking about what we were going to be saying, talking about today, and if there was one way of summing up, how I felt, and then just coincidentally, and this really did come in just as I was leaving the hotel. I'll see if I can get it up. About why we do what we do, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but it's from Ella Henderson, who was on X Factor UK 2 years ago. She came sixth, which was pretty crazy. We made an album with her, which took us 2 years. It comes out today. It's going to go to #1 in the UK. It's going to beat U2, it looks like. She's had the biggest selling single this year, and she sent me this note. And it said, "As a little girl, I had a dream, and that was to sing with my own music in my own way. Right now, I've just released my very first debut album, and you have no idea how much that means to me. I know I couldn't have done any more. And whatever happens from here, I just have to say I'm so glad to finally share my music with the world and for you to be a part of this incredible process. It really has felt special in every way, and I don't want to ever lose that. Here's to the beginning, Ella." And that's why we do what we do.
Simon Cowell, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.